Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Well, I'll be honest. We were going to have you on today to talk about the fact that you were merely trying to get the names of the prosecutors that the special counsel has employed to investigate former President Donald Trump. That was the big story yesterday until we actually learned that there is now officially a pending indictment. Tom, how does this happen? How are we the people not even allowed to know who's investigating Donald Trump?
Well, everything's a battle. You have to see to get the time of day, often from the Biden Justice Department, and I think it's still important we know the backgrounds of those who engaged in this malicious attack on President Trump through this sketchy indictment.
From what we know right now, and what it appears they're going to charge Donald Trump with, obstruction of justice, charge under the Espionage Act, destruction of records, conspiracy, all of this stuff. Could all of those charges have applied to Hillary Clinton and the email scandal that you at Judicial Watch uncovered back in 2015?
Oh, yes, and more. She didn't have any rights to take those records with her and then destroy them. When they were under subpoena and such.
Yeah.
The big difference with all these other records cases, there was someone who, for instance, who was indicted or faced prosecution, a Navy guy, I think just a month or so ago, is they didn't have any right to have these records. And, the big issue with Trump, and because we fought records issues related to this, the same principle, is that he had every right to have these records. And they changed the Justice Department position on this law, the archives position on this law, to suggest he didn't. And, the Presidential Records Act, based on what Judicial Watch has experienced, because we sued taking the Justice Department's current position for the Clinton sock drawer records, the infamous records where he had tapes of his meetings as president. We thought, well, these are records that there should be in the archives, right? He had them after he left. They got to go get them. And the court said, no, there's no basis for you to get the archives to go get him these records because the archives doesn't have the right and authority to do so. And the Justice Department said, well, if he has records after he leaves office, they're presumptively personal. So how does that fit with their current position on Trump? And of course, it doesn't. So the president had every right to have these records. They had no right to go harassing him for those records, and they set him up. And now we have this fake indictment.
So, Tom, I'm glad you explained that and this distinction, because it seems like people in the media, other commentators, some politicians are more than willing to create a separate situation between Biden and Trump or Hillary and Trump in this case. You're saying that the president had every right to be able to retain those classified documents. I think that's really important here. From the way this is being positioned in a lot of news outlets, there's a lot being made, and the president said so himself in his social media post, that this is, this has never happened in history. It's unprecedented and it's perilous. Where do you find the perilousness of this whole situation, in the fact that the president has been brought up on federal charges, indicted or will be indicted on federal charges, or the fact that there seems to be a real injustice being committed in terms of how he is being treated versus how the current president has been treated, how Hillary Clinton was not treated?
I think the perilous nature of this, Patrice, is, and you raise other issues as well, is that Joe Biden is trying to jail his number one political opponent on the eve of an election, in the middle of a campaign. And the Justice Department is happily playing along, becoming a political enforcer for Joe Biden, the candidate, the Democratic Party, and every other opponent, practically speaking, in this city of Trump and people who support him. And so when you have the Justice Department, the federal law enforcement agencies, the FBI, be turned into political enforcers to jail political opponents of the current administration, which in many ways has turned itself into a regime based on actions like this, that's what separates us from the bad guys. That's what separates a republic from, as I said, a regime.
Yeah.
And so, this is how you lose a constitutional republic with this naked politicization of our federal law enforcement agencies. And I'm not saying there hasn't been political prosecutions, meritless prosecutions by the Justice Department before, but here it's just so brazenly election interference and brazenly political. And as you highlight, the double standards. Joe Biden has records from his days as a senator that are classified. Been no raids, no threats of obstruction. There's been no grand jury activity of the sort that we saw targeting Trump. And we highlighted the Hillary Clinton difference as well. And there's no president in American history who arguably wouldn't be subject to sort of criminalization of his rights as president. So now the standard is every president is subject to criminal prosecution based on document disputes. And I tell you, that impairs the presidency as well in our structure of government. A terrible, terrible time for our constitutional republic in this regard.
Well said, Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch. But it goes well beyond just every president or every former president, because we have to reemphasize this is a presidential candidate. This is the man who is vying to and is running against the current sitting president, the top federal law enforcement official, Joe Biden. And this is at a time in the middle of this campaign where this is a hot issue about how the Justice Department and the FBI conducts itself, coming off the Durham report. And I need to keep emphasizing it's not just what the FBI and the Justice Department and the special counsel under Joe Biden have done here with regard to President Trump, but it's what they refuse to do when it comes to other people. That it's this degrading nature of our justice system that is so deteriorating to the American people, Tom, where they feel hopeless that we can't actually get a fair deal.
Yeah, people talk about a double standard. I think it's a single standard. They're being consistent. Go after their opponents and protect their own. And they've been perfectly consistent.
Tom,
when you take the communist approach to governance, that's what they do.
Yeah, it's
they don't pretend otherwise.
Can you stay with us, because I want to keep pulling on that thread with you, but also I'd like to talk about the very credible allegations that members of the House of Representatives learned about President Biden, then Vice President Biden, and what appears to be a pay-for-play deal with a foreign country, which I would think normally would be a big story. Tom, can you stay with us for one more segment?
Sure.
Oh, wonderful. All right, more with Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch, on these issues. First, Tom Fitton, I continue here. And before we get to the Biden, one last question, because I hear a lot of apologists, sadly, on both sides of the political equation. Sadly, some Republicans and conservatives who just don't know what time it is, or they think this is a good thing because they hate Trump so much. They'll say, well, listen, this is how the system works, and he'll have his day in court, and he can defend himself in front of a jury of his peers, and that's fine. This is how the system works. It doesn't quite work that way, though, in the political atmosphere we're in when there's an election going on. Right, Tom?
No, this is the exact opposite the way the system's supposed to work. You don't target someone and then figure out crimes to charge him with. Yeah. That's what they did with Trump. Mm-hmm. And I was a witness in this proceeding. I was a grand jury witness. I went in there. I was in there for 4 hours. I saw this was a political partisan exercise. I saw the prosecutorial misconduct up close. It's the exact opposite.
Real fast, Tom.
This is part of the worst corruption scandal in American history, the abuse and targeting of Trump.
I also saw you mention on social media that the FBI actually came to to your home in the Judicial Watch office. Is that true? What's that all about?
Yeah, they knocked on my door. I got, not to look for too much sympathy, but the reality is I was recovering from skin cancer surgery. A few hours I'd just gotten back, and they come knocking at my door to serve me a subpoena because we dared to highlight the corruption that I'm talking about here of the Justice Department targeting Trump.
Yeah.
And I guess they didn't like the fact that I was calling them out and telling people reality was the exact opposite. And I ended up having to testify, Judicial Watch. We had to turn over documents and such. Outrageous.
But it's an intimidation.
I go in there, and they're not asking me anything substantial. Yeah. It was an argument. It was a political argument.
Wow.
It's like being on a radio show for 4 hours, with all due respect.
Well, that would be a nightmare.
With opponents. Wait
a second. We do that every morning. Tom, let's turn over to the document that members of the House of Representatives saw yesterday. Finally, the FBI handed this thing over. They had to view it in a skiff. No leaks here on this investigation into Joe Biden. Or is there even investigation? We're told by members of Congress who saw this document that this is credible evidence from a credible FBI informant saying that Joe Biden, when vice president, got up to $10 million from a Ukrainian business, Burisma, in exchange for pressure from the United States to have a prosecutor in Ukraine removed. We know from Joe Biden's own mouth, he bragged about the fact that he got that prosecutor removed. So where's this investigation?
And where's the special counsel?
Yeah.
There's an obviously inherent conflict of interest, right? And you've got these special counsel regulations. Remember that we all had the fall down law and worship when we came to Mueller and the targeting of Trump. No special counsel for Biden. And we know what's going on. This investigation's been going on or not going on for several years. Every few months you hear this, we're going to indict Hunter, while ignoring the fact that Joe Biden is implicated in everything they're going to indict Hunter on. He is up to his neck in significant corruption charges, and they don't want to investigate it. In the meantime, they use a novel application, unprecedented interpretation of the law to target and harass Trump and indict him in 3 minutes. They've been investigating this. I used the quote word, the quote around it, since at least 2017. 2018, 2019, and no prosecutions or even and the news isn't that he was bribed. There's allegations of bribery because everyone knows that was the basis of the Trump impeachment, right?
Yeah.
The news is the FBI has been sitting on this to protect Joe Biden and interfere in the election. And this is how you rig elections, by hiding and protecting one candidate while trying, in this case, to jail another. That's election rigging just as much as stuffing ballots is.
Yeah. Well, Tom, what I found interesting, President Biden called it this malarkey in response to some of the Republicans who've come out, who've seen the information.
Oh, and he also said this.
Where's the money?
He asked, where's the money? Show me the evidence that you have against me. But what's interesting, Democrats, who are also privy to this information, have been silent. And that is surprising. Is that telling to you as well, Tom, that there is something there? Because if there wasn't, the Democrats would be rallying to defend President Biden.
Yeah, well, I think it's not a secret in Washington, D.C. that Joe Biden's corrupt. I think there's more than one reason why, for instance, he didn't run in 2016. Those issues were much hotter then. And remember, they wanted to impeach Trump for raising questions about Joe Biden corruption. In fact, they did.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a signal that Democrats were nervous about it. I mean, they were so angry at Trump for pursuing Biden corruption, they tried to drive him out of office for it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But, this has never happened before in American history, what they did to Trump. And, we really need to pray for America. And in addition to demanding that Congress take immediate steps to shut this down, and frankly, if Biden were honest, he'd shut down the Justice Department investigation of Trump as well. And if he doesn't, you can presume the worst.
We'll leave it there. Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch, sobering thoughts. And I certainly echo your call for prayer here, because these are tenuous times, to be certain. Tom, thanks for joining us, sir. Always good to talk with you.
Thank you.